It's the Sick Podcast, CF Montreal Talk. I'm Marinaro. After winning 6 straight games in 2 different competitions, CF Montreal now has dropped their last couple of games. Wednesday night in Cincinnati, a 3-0 loss, and most recently on Saturday night, a 2-1 loss at New York Red Bulls. 5 games in a 15-game span. It has everyone wondering whether or not they should have turned over the club because they look like they were running out of gas. We'll bring in a guy who has a lot of experience as a former player, as a former coach, former director. He had every single title you can think of. 26 years with the club. I know there will be no shortage of things to talk about with Nick DeSantis. He joins me. Coming up, we are live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. I'm Marinaro.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. CF Montreal Talk.
Here's the chance. They've got the goal. Absolutely incredible. Cameron Porter delivers the goal to send Montreal Impact into the CONCACAF Champions League semi-final.
The sickest CF Montreal podcast. It's gonna be sick.
Marinaro, the Sick Podcast, CF Montreal Talk. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's absolutely free. And follow us on Twitter at SickPod, CFMTL. CF Montreal loses 2-1 versus the New York Red Bulls. And now they come back home where they're going to host Forge FC in the Canadian Championship. And then they're going to host Inter Miami. One guy who knows a thing or two about the Canadian Championship and about the Montreal Impact in general. He's former Montreal Impact player, coach, technical director, sporting director, international VP, business relations, technical development. He had every single title you can think of. Nick DeSantis, good afternoon.
Hey, Tony, how are you?
Very good. Nice to see you, Nick.
Nice to see you and nice to hear from you.
Even though I see you every now and then on some fields, especially in Saint Laurent, as you're either an observer to watch their PLSQ team or actually coaching a young team yourself. What age group? Are they U11s or U12s, Nick?
U13. They're
2010.
Yeah.
They grow fast, you see?
I've had them for like 6-7 years now. Yeah.
Yeah. Is anyone giving you any competition at all in the league, or because I know it's quite the team?
No, but we try to get our own competition as well. I think, for the kids, it's important to play a lot of games, but always challenge them. So we look for different competitions, whether it's the CF Montreal, whether it's teams from Toronto. There's a lot of, good teams here as well, U13 teams. So, I think it's good to have a different variety as well for the kids because, sometimes you don't want their confidence to get too low and sometimes you don't want to get too high. So you always have to kind of manage that and give them good opportunities to play, different types of teams.
Good for you. I hear you're having fun with it, Nick.
Oh, I'm blessed. It brings me back again. You can't take away the passion from someone. And this is what I try to do with them is transmit everything that I felt and I feel inside for the game. And hopefully it gives them that emotional side as well.
Nick, although I wasn't planning on going here, I love amateur soccer, as you know. And when my eldest started off, I got involved and volunteered my services. And as much as I loved it, I look back now and I say to myself, and everyone thought I was pretty good. And I say to myself, I wasn't all that good after all, because you get caught up in the whole wanting to win with everyone because that's what the parents want and that's what the parents demand. And when I look back too, I think I was too hard on my son because I didn't want to play favorites. So when you don't want to play favorites, sometimes you end up going completely the other way. And I thought I was a little bit harder on him and maybe took some of that fun away. How are you dealing with it?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's not easy because my son does play on the team. When you talk about parents and everything, I think that's the first thing that, I tried to create, and it's been years now, is the environment around the team. I know that in amateur soccer, a lot of times the on-field stuff is provoked by the outfield with parents and whatnot. So, I try to create that environment of parents being very supportive, coming in to cheer on, but anything to do with the players, anything to do with the referees, anything to do with the other parents, it's my responsibility, and it's made clear that I need to manage all that because in the end, the kids need to hear one voice, and the environment that I try to put them in is always to play hard, but to respect everything around it, meaning the referees, meaning the opponents, meaning the other fans as well, the other parents. And that's something important to me. And going back to your question, it's not easy, when you're coaching your son as well, because like you said, you want to send messages, and sometimes, it does happen that I'm harder on him just to make sure that, everyone understands that everyone's treated the same way. And it's not fair at times, but I try to explain to him when we get home, because when we're on the field, I'm the coach of the team, and he knows that. And when we're home, I'm his father. So I try to have those conversations with him, even though it's not easy. But, it's always something that you have to manage because, it can get in the way.
Nick, speaking of managing, how about managing rest, recovery, recuperation? I get you on today. It's funny. I'm not going to lie to you. When I woke up this morning, I was thinking, all right, okay, today we're going to do a CF Montreal podcast. We're going to go live. And who do I get on? And I start thinking of a few different topics. Okay, what are we going to talk about? And I ended up watching Marquons l'Histoire. And I came across it on social media, and it was extremely well done. And I watched it, and I saw you, and we're going to get to that a little bit later, okay? And I saw the passion and talking about the club and the good old days. And then I said, you know what? He was a player, he was a coach, he was technical development, he wore a lot of hats. Let me talk to Nick DeSantis. Nick, I want to show you the starting lineup on Saturday night, if we can bring it up, for CF Montreal. All right, there you have it. Sirois in goal. A three-man back line of Camacho with Campbell to his right and Waterman to his left. At left wing back, Lassiter. At right wing back, Herrera. Choinière and Wanyama playing in front of the back line with Duke in behind Lapalainen and Ofer. So a 3-4-1-2 formation. Nick, everyone has a school of thought on managing players. This team, some players in particular, look like they were running on fumes on Saturday night. They were a little bit out of gas. I spoke with John Limniadis last week, and, we also talked about, worry about today, and we'll worry about tomorrow, and trying to get the result. What's your philosophy on trying to manage players 5 games in 15 days? What was your philosophy?
Yeah. When I was coaching the team, it's only normal. Again, it was a different era. We didn't have as many games, but we did play Friday night and probably Sunday night when we were doing bus rides, and we can get 2 games in on the weekend. So we can take that into consideration. The game maybe was a little bit slower, less physical. Our philosophy, and again, it goes always back on a philosophy, the philosophy of the club. We needed to win games. And when I felt, if I ask a player, how you feeling? Everyone's going to always say, I'm good. And I was a type that the best players are going to play. And yes, I'll have subs coming in. Did I think about like they think about today? There's the Sunday game, there's the Wednesday game, there's the Sunday game. How do we manage the 3 games in a week with the roster? It wasn't as detailed back then, and I understand it today that it goes more into detail. Why? Because they're consuming more, it's more physical, it's more demanding. But if I have my coach's hat on, I'm always looking at the game and saying, okay, who's going to give me the best chances to win the game? And I think that goes through a lot of minds of a lot of coaches, especially, coaches that don't have the depth to, I guess, manage the roster in that way, where there's cup games and there's league games.
All right. Okay. I asked the question because Choinière, who's had a very, very good start of the season, we're actually a third of the way into the season. I think you'd have to say he's been their best player. He looked like he wasn't nearly as effective. Camacho looked like he was slowing down. When balls go over Camacho and Waterman, they clearly have some trouble. Waterman looked like he wasn't in his element on Saturday night either. And so, Zachary Brault-Guillard is fresh. Herrera has been really overworked a lot. It's a position, the wing-back position, that requires a lot of distance covered on the field, as you know, and a lot of running up and down. You need a lot of cardio. Mm-hmm. And that's why I asked the question, Nick. I take a look at the loss, but look, I can understand wanting to play your best players, right?
Yeah. So, when you spoke about Choinière, and I'm the first one to be extremely happy for him, because I respect everything that he's done to get to where he is. He went through a lot, especially after coming up from the academy into the first team. He's had injuries. He was a lot of the times not chosen, but he went through a lot. He went through a lot mentally, and he fought through it. Why? Because he's a warrior. Why? Because that's what he wants to do. And I respect that. And I give him a lot of credit for it. And you know what? It's great to say that, he's been probably their best player. On the other hand, with all due respect, when you're talking about Mathieu Choinière being your best player, then you have to think about even, the level of your team. Because, Mathieu is a team player. He's a player that every team needs, every coach needs on their team, because he's very versatile. You can play him wing back, you can play him center mid, you can move him around everywhere. But, he shouldn't be the best player on the field game in, game out. And that's something that, in the end, when you look at even the game the other night, it lacks quality. It lacks people that have a certain knack to move a game around or change a game around in different moments. And yeah, in the end, it's hard for him because he puts everything out there every game. And if I were a coach, I would try to keep him on the field as well, because at least you know that what you're going to get. There's a lot of players that you're always like thinking this is a coin toss. With Mathieu Choinière, you know what you're going to get every game.
Nick, coming off of your comment of he shouldn't be the best player on your team, or it says a lot about the quality of the team. Here's a tweet and a chart that we're going to bring up, because the MLS, of course, made salaries known a couple of weeks ago. And let's bring up the tweet from Tom Bogart. All right, top 5 salary spending in MLS. 29 teams. CF Montreal is dead last at 10.5 million. Over 15 million away from the number 1 spot. Let's take a look at the chart of all the teams so you can see them, of course. And there would be a chart with all the teams. All right, so there you are. They're at the bottom, of course. MLS salary outlay for spring, summer of 2023. Nick, this is an organization that has had in the past, when you were there as part of the staff and the management team and the technical department, sporting director as well. You had a lot of titles, man. Okay. Marco Di Vaio, Nacho Piatti, Didier Drogba, Alessandro Nesta, the list goes on and on. It's 2023 now. Talk to me about your thoughts on them being 29th out of 29th in spending. Like I said a couple of days ago, that when I found out that San Diego was coming into the league anywhere between 450 to 500 million US, I said, that's great work by Garber. That's great work by the league. But the league is growing so fast that it almost worries me. Can they keep up, Nick, if they're going to be the lowest spending team in the league?
So, when you compare back in 2012 to 2017, 18, there was a philosophy in place, and basically, we wanted to attract players, quality players that would make a difference, name players, because, even with Alessandro Nesta, that was more of a publicity. It was an opportunity because Marco Di Vaio was here. They were good friends. And it was an opportunity almost to say, hey, I'm going to give it another kick at it. But for us, bringing him in his name, it brought more people to the stadium. In today's world, you know, if I would ask Alessandro Nesta to come in today, he'd say, "Are you crazy? I can't keep up with that." You know, so the philosophies were different. The stage was different because we were trying to attract people, and I think we did a pretty good job in terms of getting people engaged. These players here, they brought a certain sense of commitment. They had a responsibility that they understood, because we were always in a
that was probably Nesta on the phone, Nick.
Yeah, probably
saying, "Don't talk so fast." Don't talk.
Exactly, yeah. So these guys came in, and we were very humble bringing them in, and always saying, "Guys, we need you to come in and help us grow. We want to keep growing as a club. We want to keep growing as a city, as a province, culture of soccer. You guys have been at the highest levels, and when we want to grow with." So we gave them a sense of responsibility towards everything, and they felt these are good people. They care for the club, and we will help them. And these are things that are extremely important within a club, because today it's a different philosophy, Tony. And I get it. Like if the ownership group all of a sudden changed philosophy for whatever reason, it's okay. As long as there's a philosophy in place, and then you're saying, we're going with this philosophy here. My only question is that, you know, when you're going with that kind of budget, and, you know, the message publicly is we will work within and work to develop our homegrown, right? That's where my question mark is, well, if your message is that, which is great, are you putting your homegrowns or your academy players in the best position to succeed and get to the next levels? And that's where I mostly have the question mark on.
Well, I don't want to put you in a bad spot. I mean, but I think in French they say poser la question, c'est répondre, Nick. If we take a look at the academy, the U19 team was removed a couple of years ago. The reserve team is not in the MLS Next Pro League. They're the only club in the league that's not. There's not a huge budget invested in coaching. Games, tournaments, individual development in the players. Is it safe to say that I'm right, that the answer to that is no?
Well, from what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, I was able to
Don't worry about it. Yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, just reject it.
I was able to go watch a game, because there was a game in my area last night, and I guess it was their U23, the reserve, CF Montréal.
Yeah, that was at the rec field, right?
Yes.
So let me tell you something, if I can. When my son was there last year, that's the only game that I was nervous about all year. I said he's going to end up breaking his leg on this field. It is one of the worst fields in the province. It is unplayable.
Yeah. So yeah, if we want to talk about that first, the rec here, yes, it's a safety hazard. You know, above all, you know, you got to think of the players are at risk. And at that field there, when I saw it last night, we played there with my kids a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to put in a complaint. But seeing the field last night, and especially, you know, having players, if you're investing and you're investing in players, and you have them playing on a ground like that, where I guess the rubber has resurfaced and has taken over the field, you don't really see much of the turf. That's a safety hazard. And you know, even for a professional club, you know, to look at that and say, hey, I don't want my players playing on that. And that needed to be something, or needs to be something that needs to be addressed, because again, not only for the game of last night, but for players in general, young players, it's putting a player at risk with that type of field.
So if you would have been there last night, you would have been with the club. You have no idea what the field looks like. You get there, you walk around the field for the very first time. You're seeing that field. You're saying my players aren't playing here tonight.
Well, listen, most clubs, and again, I'm not saying that the CF should have done that. It's more on the field and the club, but it's not a playable field. First and foremost for putting players at risk injury-wise, but then even in terms of now the ball, the rolling of the ball, the way you hit the ball, you can't hit it right. Like there's so many elements that don't make it a game where you'll see good level. And again, going back to that, I was able to watch a half of that game. And, when you see the team, with all due respect, they're playing against a semi-pro team. And, these are kids now, they're U23. Their next step is to get to the first team, and they're playing those level games. You have to question how ready will these kids be to get to the next level, because there's a big, big gap between that level and the MLS level. And, just little examples of, very low pressure on the ball from MRO. So most of the players have all the time in the world to make plays, and still they're not coming out. So now you're questioning the quality of the players. It's this is where I question if the philosophy is to develop within. Are you putting all your investments and putting them in the best position to succeed, for these kids to succeed? And that means, are you putting them in the best environments to be challenged, right? Especially at that age, because that's the next step. Do you have the best coaches in place? Because in the end, this coach here needs to understand that not everyone's going to make the first team from that team. But all of a sudden now, whether it's 3-4 players that have that potential, are you putting them in the best conditions to keep progressing and getting to the next levels?
So I don't want to put you in a bad spot, so I'll say it this way. You can completely disassociate, right? So I'll take it here. They don't have the best coaches in the city. They don't have the best players in the city. They have good coaches, some of them. They have some good players, but they just don't. And something has to change. I mean, when Wilfred used to coach in the academy, right? Wilfred used to coach in the academy, and he did really good work in the academy. And they were able to grow him and develop him. Not only the players, too. You have to be able to grow coaches and develop coaches, too, to have the coaches be able to go up to the first team, right? I mean, are the coaches in place there now? Are they growing these coaches and developing these coaches so that they end up on the first team? I mean, I don't know.
Well, that again is based on philosophy up top, and then based on the person running the show in the academy. So, when Philippe Ulafra was there, which I think he did a great job, because he, when we did hire him, we didn't have an academy. My responsibility was to go find someone to run it, because I wasn't able to run an academy. And Philippe came about, and Philippe put the structure in place. I remember a few years back, maybe 5-6 years ago, there was a company from Belgium that came and evaluate and did a report on each club of the MLS.
Double Pass is their name. They do internal audits of academies around the world.
Yes. And they came in and they went through every club. And then they gave reports to every club, 200-page report, I think, on every club. And Montreal was ranked 3rd in MLS. And I never forget the person saying, you guys keep doing what you're doing within your academy, because you're in the right direction. So, that to me is all credit to Philippe Ulafroy, because I think that he did a great job. He was a technical director that took total responsibility. At times you're going to go head to head, because it's only normal that you're the person, the technical director, that's seeing each kid every day. Each kid developed from the age of 14 all the way to the age of 18. And at moments, Tony, and I can vouch for that. And when I was in that position, is I go in and then watch a couple of training sessions and I say, you know what, I like that guy and I like that guy. And the technical director says, Nick, yeah, but you know what? There's these other guys, they're ahead of them. And you're like, nah, but I like that guy. And, he was able to have those discussions, hard discussions, right? And he would try to get his message across. Why? Because he knew he was responsible for it. And he knew that it was him every day seeing these players grow mentally, physically, technically, tactically. So these are things that are extremely, extremely important within the academy.
That's back in the day when you used to get 2 or 3 report cards, players of 50 or 60 different categories of where they stand in terms of passing, kicking, ball control, vision, technique, training, work habits, competitiveness, all the strong foot, weaker foot.
Yeah. So I listen. This is again. I'm talking about Philippe, and we were talking about the academy back then. Yeah. With Marinos, I know him. I know him face to face. I'll say I don't know how he works. I don't know what his philosophy is. So I'm not questioning anything of that. Within the academy, the only thing, like I said, that I questioned is that if the philosophy is to develop within, then I just hope that they're doing everything right for these players to be put in the best conditions to make it to the next levels.
Yeah. Look, I know the players are somewhat concerned, and I know that members of the management team went down. I think it was about 4 weeks ago to talk to them and say, rest assured, we want you to be here, and this is a good league for you to play in, and this is the way we're going to do it. But I think that what they do is they take a look at some players that are identified from the Canadian national program, and they take those players and they jump over the reserve level, and they'll bring them up to practice with the first team every now and then. But like you said, there's a gap though, right? Once you get from that reserve team to the big leagues, there's a gap, and you have to be able to do something. But you can always loan out players to the CPL. You can always do that.
Yes, but I think that once you get to a certain age, at 16, 17 years old, all of a sudden now within the academy, you need to now identify your top talent. You just have to, because not everyone's going to make it. There's got to be that identification of your top talent. And all of a sudden now, work in a specific program. And you know what? Other kids that aren't in that program, you want to get into that program, then you need to get, yourself to another level.
Yeah.
But these players that are identified, all of a sudden, you got to basically put a plan in place and say, this is the plan for you. You're 16. We expect you at 18, 19 to be within our first team. And this is the plan going forward, so that at least it's clear to them, right? Whether it's to the parents, whether it's to the agent, whether it's to the player, saying this is the plan for you. And then for them to decide, this is a good plan for me to keep progressing, because in the end, it's not about the 17-year-old saying, I want a first team contract. It's about that kid understanding what it takes to get to the next level.
Did anyone catch your eye last night?
No, the level wasn't very good. There's one boy that, I've seen a couple of years ago that I speak to him once in a while, just to give him advice. And Malik Dauda, he's been within the academy now for many years. Just looking at him, his profile, his size, his ability with the ball to his feet. He looks like a player that, can play various positions, whether it's a defensive mid, whether it's a center back. He's got a lot of volume. It catches my eye, but I can't evaluate because I haven't seen enough of them. And these kids, you have to follow them because you gotta see them in different moments against different levels and all of that. So it's not for me to evaluate that.
That's fair, Nick. Look, Nick, I almost feel like I have to ask you because a couple of weeks ago, Patrice Bernier was inducted into the Montreal Impact Wall of Fame, which started off inducting players back in 2018 with Gabriel Gervais and Nevio Pizzolito, and 1 year later it was Greg Sutton and Mauro Biello, and now Bernier once again a couple of weeks ago.
All well deserved.
Yeah, you're right about that. But Nick DeSantis would have been well deserved as well. Were you at all contacted?
No, I haven't been contacted yet. No, but that's again, I don't worry about those things. For me, it's almost like the past. And again, I don't want to make it a story. No, I haven't been contacted, and that's it. For me, I've always been the type that everything I've done, everything, whether it was right, whether it's wrong, I kept it inside. I lived through it. The emotions I've lived every day with the Montreal Impact for 26 years.
Yeah,
I've lived them the same way, always with a certain passion, always trying to do what was best for the club in every different ways. And these are things that'll never go away, Tony. So,
yeah,
having my name on something, yeah, it's nice, but in the end, those things, they stay inside within, and they'll never go away. And one of my biggest, to tell you the truth, Tony, is my biggest regret is more, for everything I put into it. I know at times, with the fans, it was difficult. I had, difficult moments, and I was never put in a position to rectify. And those are regrets I have, because in the end, even when they were against me, I would go to stadiums, and to feel their energy, it was outstanding. And these are things that it was always part of the sport, and I got it. But in the end, it's a bit of a regret that it was never rectified, because I really think that at times people thought I was doing things which I wasn't. When I wore different hats. It was never really explained what I really did with the club in certain moments, and that's the sad part. Which I do regret, because it still leaves that bitterness. It leaves that void. Because again, I know as a player, as a coach, I know when the fans were with me, and I know as well as a GM that they weren't, and okay, rightfully so. But there's ways of mending those things, and those were the things that stay within, that are regretful.
Yeah, well, I think that'll be rectified one day, Nick. But at the same time, I think everyone knows what you gave to the club. 26 years wearing a bunch of different hats, like you said. Look, I want to bring up a chart. Let's take a look at your list of accolades here if we can. 26 years with the club. Player stats with the Montreal Impact, regular season and playoffs: 260 games played, 22 goals, 34 assists, thousands and thousands and thousands of minutes, which led to a APSL championship in 1994. And of course, you also played 84 games when the team played indoors, 28 goals there. Your managerial stats: 63 wins, 20 losses, 29 draws, winning percentage of .563. Nick, I asked because, and you were right to say, very right to say, that the 5 players that are up on the Wall of Fame all very much deserve to be there. But usually there's 2 ways you can do it. You either go with the most deserving, or you go with the ones that retired first. I had John Limniadis on the program last week. I mean, he retired in 2001. You retired in 2003 as a player. Both very deserving, and I think you guys probably should have been there by now.
Yeah, but there's things that you can't control within the club. I always go by, do what you can control. Things you can't control, don't waste your energy on them. This is what I try to explain to my kids. I tried to explain even at a different level, because there's certain things in life that you just can't control, and that's okay.
I know you said everything you did is, you know what you did, but how much would it mean to you to be inducted into that Wall of Fame?
again, Tony, recognition is always nice, and no one's going to hide that.
Yeah.
No one's ever going to hide that recognition isn't nice. But, like I said, it's weird. My recognition is being able to walk in the street and people saying, hey, well done. Hey, how's it going? You did a great job with the Impact. That's recognition for me. My everyday, I'm a Montrealer. I lived here all my life. For me, again,
and you get that every day when you sit down at Cafe San Simeone in Little Italy and you have a coffee. I know, I get text messages. Yeah. Nick DeSantis is here. Nick DeSantis is here.
So those are things that are important to me. The things that are important to me is that I'm able to pick up the phone, or ex-players call me from all over the world. Those relationships, like life is about that. And for me to pick up a phone and see how my ex-players are doing, and ex-coaches, most of the coaches, we have relationships. So that's the beauty of the sport. That's what makes me want to keep loving the sport, because, you feel that everything you try to do through difficult times, through mistakes, there's always the human side. And everything I try to do with players, coaches, GMs, agents, clubs, everything I try to build a relationship with, a human relationship, because in this world, especially in the sport, everything is very gray. So you try to build relationships of trust and then try to go along with that. And that's one thing that I'm so happy for is that, these relationships that helped build the club, because these people understood what it meant to me. Goes a long way, and for me to still have those relationships, those are things that for me are extremely important or gratifying.
Nick, I know we're about 37 minutes in, and I so appreciate your time. So maybe one or two more if I can. And this one's not going to be an easy one either. You put it very well before when you said the important thing, Tony, is having a philosophy. And identifying a philosophy, and they have one. So we know what the philosophy was when you worked with the club, and we know what the philosophy is now. The philosophy now is to try and integrate young players into the club, which is very honorable, to try and get them some playing time, to try and develop them, to try and raise their value. And then at that point, boom, they're sold. And, the team makes money and it goes back into to the ownership group. Perfect. I understand all of that. I want to ask you something now as a fan of the game. Is that something that you think you can sell to fans?
So look at what happened last year, right? When Wilfred was in place, and I guess the philosophy was out there already.
Yes.
It all depends what you build within. And I think Wilfred did an amazing job in terms of what he had on hand and what he did with that team. And when you talk about philosophy, then you got to talk about identity. And he created an identity in that team, which clearly every game that I was able to watch, right, I can see he had his hand on it. And for me as a club, that's gratifying, because you say, you know what, this is a guy that came through our academy. He paid his dues. He worked under different coaches. He got an opportunity, and all of a sudden, with what he had in his hands, and again, maybe all of a sudden you have three difference makers, and it's different because now you're dealing with guys of a certain level. We don't know. But with what he did, with what he had on hand, was an amazing job. So people caught on to it, and people engaged themselves into it, right? So you can't say, like a fan, what's going to happen is like now with this philosophy, maybe they'll always say, well, we're going to wait and see. Let's wait and see what it looks like, right? So everything that was built, I thought last year, in terms of re-engaging fans, all of a sudden they had to start again this year because the main pillar was gone. Yeah. So all of a sudden everything's put into question again. And slowly this year, you saw there weren't many people. They got a string of results. All of a sudden there's more people. So you're always in a position of saying, I don't know. We'll wait and see, you know?
But Nick, you know as well as I do that Wilfred got the most out of that team last year. You know, based on what he had, they probably overachieved a little bit. And not being being the highest spending club in the league doesn't guarantee success, but it's extremely difficult, though, to be able to go very far, win a championship, or even go to the final if you're not spending a lot. So if you were there and I would come to you and I would say, listen, Nick, thought about it. We've tried a few things. What the philosophy I'd like to have now going forward is we give some young kids a chance. We try and go get players on loan, or we try and get them on a transfer. We don't pay anything for them, maybe a little bit of GAM here and there. Try and get players, resurrect their career, try and get some projects, try and develop them. And the second that they raise their value, that they become pretty good, we sell them. This is what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. You would look at me, you would say what?
So we were in a different time. You know, when a sporting director has a job to do, okay, and a sporting director needs to show the ownership group that, you know what, we'll pay this player, we'll buy him at this much, and we'll make sure that his value is going to go up. In my position back then, all right, when you have, and this is why sometimes, you know, things were a bit foggy, is that when Nacho Piatti, after his first year, we had offers on the table, right? 5, 8. I think there was whether a Saudi Arabian team, I can't remember. It was between 5 and 10 million, right?
Wow.
And you know, I would be maybe a different sporting director would have said, hey, we got money on the table. He's did a year here. We're going to reinvest it. But the way
pardon me, Nick, if I can, when you acquired him from San Lorenzo, or when you signed him, that was the last year of his contract, right?
Yeah, it was. But you have to understand, Tony, that Nacho Piatti, from the day the negotiations started, in terms of my first trip to Argentina, the person I worked with calls me and says, hey, there's a player, you guys are looking for a number 10. There's a player that just got back from Italy. You're the first guy I'm calling. You should have a look at him. And I went to look at him and I says, okay, but how much is this going to cost? In terms of, back then we were kind of doing like 18-month contracts, because they would come in June. So it'd be like June, right, to December, and then another year. So an 18-month contract. And we were always looking. Marco was the same thing, 18-month contract. And I forget, Nacho, if it was 2 or 2.5 million, everything included, right? So what happens in Argentina is that, and what happened then is Nacho with San Lorenzo started, you know, playing and starting having success. So it's only normal that the more success he was having, the higher the price would go.
Yeah, he was scoring in season and in championship.
Well, in Libertadores, he had a great Libertadores. Yeah. And there was interest from a lot of teams around the world. So that's where his price value went up. Now, getting back to my story is that the way I looked at things and the way I knew the ownership group, Joey, is, you know, I would always say, we can't get rid of Nacho. And, you know, and he'd be like, well, we can maybe get 2, 3 players for Nacho. And I'd be like, yeah, we can't get rid of him. He you know, he's made such a difference on the team. He loves it here. The players love him. You know,
the fans love him.
The fans love him. My thought process, Tony, and again, I'm not saying it's right, because it was to a certain extent selfish. Why? Because all I thought about was the club and the success of the club, and players like that not going to someone else. So I would attach myself to these players. Why? Because it was almost like, this is my family and I want him in my family and I don't want him to leave my family, which for a sporting director is probably not the best scenario, because a sporting director has to be able to understand too, you know what, it's time to sell him. You know, we can make money. So I was in a different. It was weird because I was in a different role. I was a different role. I was someone that would convince people to come to the club. I would someone that made sure that they understood what the club was about, how I felt, and how the ownership group felt of the club, and to give them that responsibility of commitment, saying, this guy brought me here. He's done everything for me, and I need to give back to him. Yeah. And that's something that's extremely important within a club, because in the end, you're investing a lot of money. When you're talking about Toronto with all that the money they spent with Insigne, with Bernardeschi, now, are these guys in the best environment? Do they have the right people around them to make them feel, hey, we need you here, you have this response, and for them to say, we owe these people because they invested in us, and we need to make sure that we're fully committed at 100%.
You know what it reminds me of? You know what Toronto reminds me of? Your first year in MLS, you had a North American coach, you had some European players, and I'm not so sure that they saw things the same way.
So, yes and no, because trust me, I'm pretty sure that Bob Bradley understands the quality that Bernardeschi has, that Insigne have. The only thing that I question more is the players you bring in. When you go out to make these huge investments, you got to really make sure that you do your homework on everything, whether it's personality, whether it's family, the environment he was in there, the culture he's coming into here. Are they able to adapt? The ability to now, when I look at Toronto today and I watch them play, and they're not a possession team right now. And I'm looking at it going, okay, so how is Insigne going to have success if you're not in possession of the ball? So what happens is it creates a dynamic of, well, now he's got to run more, because, if you don't have your forward running as much, you don't have your midfielder running, the guy, Bernardeschi, maybe less. All of a sudden, 3 guys aren't running. Now you have a problem.
Yeah.
You better be good in possession where the other team has to run after you.
You're right.
So these are all things that this is the homework that needs to be put behind before signing major players like that.
Nick, and we'll do this we'll do this at ending if you don't mind. But did you see Bernardeschi's post-game comments following the 1-0 loss versus Austin?
Yeah,
let's bring it up right now. I think we have. All right, okay. We need to change something. We need a little bit more tactics. We need an idea of how we play. This is the real problem for me. It's impossible to play like this when we play without an idea. Clearly, this does not look good if you're taking a look from the coach's perspective. It almost looks like he's questioning that. Nick, I know you're enjoying semi-retirement very much, but I have to ask you, would you think of going to the dark side if they called? Because you have experience dealing with players of this name, of this magnitude. You've been there before with a North American coach, European players, the culture and all that stuff. You have a lot of experience with this. If MLSE called, would Nick DeSantis listen? Would he make a move, or would he say, I used to be a Montreal Impact, I can't be a Toronto FC?
Well, listen, I think that anybody that's been in that world, and is out of it right now, is it gratifying? For sure. When you look at, I'll play things in my head because, from the day I left, I've gotten calls from a couple of agents asking me if I was interested in doing things abroad, and I had no real interest. And today, it needs to be very specific. When I look at Toronto and the market it has, it's a bigger Montreal market.
They're a U.S. city, basically.
They're a U.S. city, but still with a diverse fan base.
Yes.
Bigger than Montreal's, but diverse, because, look at, when they had brought Jovinko in, and I think they tried to kind of replicate that, but, it didn't go their way. But I think that's a market I would understand a lot more than an American market.
Yeah.
And when you're bringing in players like that, like I said, I've experienced the field as a player. I've experienced the dressing room as a coach, and I've experienced as a VP, as a sporting director. I've experienced the world in terms of agents, in terms of clubs, in terms of meeting people around the world. So, that experience, when you've experienced all that, makes you understand better what an environment in a club needs to look like, and I think, I have that experience.
Nick, I so appreciate your time. I wanted to keep you for 30, but we went on for 50. The way you talk and the way I talk, I figure we're going to go a little overtime. I want to say this and ending, Nick, it's always nice catching up with you. It's always nice talking to you. And even though you are somewhat detached, no longer working in a capacity for the club, I still can feel, and even when we're doing this kind of like in a Zoom setting, I still can feel that you bleed blue, white, and black, and you have the club tattooed on your heart. And they say that time heals all wounds, Nick, and I hope that we can that it's going to happen, and I'm sure it will at some point. And rest assured that everyone watching, everyone listening, everyone knows what you gave to the club. 26 years, it's really something. Thank you very much again, Nick.
Thank you very much, Tony.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. There you have it. Nick DeSantis. That's it for me. CF Montreal Talk, the Sick Podcast. Follow us on YouTube. Subscribe. It's absolutely free. And follow us on Twitter at SickPod, CFMTL. Next game, next up, Forge FC, Wednesday night, Canadian Championship, right here in Montreal. And we'll be back to talk to you about it, I'm sure, on Thursday following the game. Bye for now.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast, CF Montreal Talk on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.